Hello everyone, this is Fami Jaiswal. Welcome you all to another video from our side, and today we are going to talk about Omnibus Approval. Omnibus Approval has been grossly misunderstood. Why do I say that? Because we found companies making omnibus use of Omnibus Approval by passing very fluid resolutions. While with the introduction of the industry standards note, there may be some difference because the same also covers RPTs passed under the Omnibus Approval route, but it becomes very important for us to understand the exact nature of Omnibus Approval. Now, what is Omnibus Approval? Omnibus Approval is a way of taking approval before your audit committee for RPTs, wherein you have a generic approval for specific transactions, which are recurring transactions. When you place Omnibus Approval agenda, when you send this agenda to your audit committee, you are not placing the exact terms of the transaction. You are giving a broad term. You are giving a range when it comes to the price. So when you are passing an Omnibus Approval, you need to provide like who is your specific party, what is the specific tenure of your transaction, because the audit committee should know what kind of transaction it is giving approval for. When it comes to the value, you will find Omnibus Approvals providing a higher limit or a blanket limit. Now this blanket limit will have to have an alignment with the expected values or the projected values. It cannot be far from reality. So for example, if we know that the company has a track record of disbursing loans of maybe 500 crores in a financial year, we find Omnibus Approval for 10,000 crores or 5,000 crores for that matter. It becomes extremely far from reality. So that alignment needs to be in place. Talking about the terms of the transactions, as I mentioned, you will always find a range. Now this range that you provide the audit committee has to be not so wide that it becomes absolutely meaningless. And finally, you also give an indicative base price. That means the basis with which you will fix the price whenever the implementation of that transaction takes place. Now, having said that, what is the downside of making an incorrect usage of Omnibus Approval or having an aggressive way of using Omnibus Approval? So when it comes to Omnibus Approval, we need to understand that the audit committee will only have the benefit of a hindsight and not foresight, because the transactional details are not there before the audit committee when it is passing the approval. Now this hindsight benefit also get minimized because the transactions so passed under the Omnibus Approval route comes back to the audit committee only at the time of, say, the quarterly reviews, at which stage the audit committee might not get into the details of the transaction or might look at it in a very limited manner. So therefore, the entire effectiveness of passing Omnibus Approval goes away, right? So having said that, it's important to also understand that for which all transactions Omnibus Approval is not suitable. Transactions which are not in the ordinary course of business, or transactions, because the transactions which are not in the ordinary course of business, they cannot be considered to be recurring in nature. Similarly, transactions which are not at arm's length, because that's not within the powers of the audit committee. Transactions where the terms are already clear and visible. So we're talking about a specific contract, a definitive contract. Here the terms are fixed. So where is the need of getting this kind of a definitive contract passed under the Omnibus Approval route? You can take it through the specific approval route. And finally, the multi-year contracts, because here talking about Omnibus Approval is only passed for a financial year. So multi-year contracts again lose their value altogether. Now, having said that, there's another aspect to Omnibus Approval, which is the criteria for Omnibus Approval. So we all know that under the Rule 6A, there's a requirement of setting a criteria for passing Omnibus Approval. What we have seen during our checking, that most of the companies have a uniform criteria. Uniform criteria, what do I mean when I say that? Because you need to fix a criteria of what would be the maximum value per transaction in a financial year, what would be the maximum value in aggregate with a related party in a financial year. So for all of that, companies fix a single value there for the single transactions as well as the aggregate transactions. But they miss out on a point that fixing a uniform criteria is not fixing a criteria effectively itself. You're not fixing a criteria which can be effectively put to use. So therefore, a single uniform criteria may not be suitable for all transactions. The audit committee should consider the different parameters depending upon the nature of the entity, the nature of the transactions, and the nature of relationship with the related party when they are fixing the criteria. Now, for example, in the nature of business, when I know that I'm into a manufacturing sector, therefore the disbursal of loans might be very, very limited to my related parties. So therefore, having the same criteria for purchase sale of the transactions or maybe, production of specific products versus the limits on the financial disbursements, they cannot be the same. Similarly, on the maximum value of a transaction, because we have to see the frequency of the transaction and the nature of relationship there, that will also have a bearing on the actual implementation of the transactions. And having said that, having a uniform criteria for omnibus approval will make the criteria useless. Therefore, companies must consider having a criteria which is based on certain parameters that make the setting of the criteria more meaningful. So having said that, I would like to conclude today's session. Thank you so much. We'd love to hear any feedback from you.